Every year, millions of pieces of luggage are checked onto commercial flights around the world. Almost all of them arrive exactly where they're supposed to. But every now and then, a suitcase is never claimed. Maybe the passenger missed a connection. Maybe the baggage tag was damaged. Maybe no one ever came back for it. Eventually, those forgotten bags end up in specialized facilities where they're cataloged, stored, and, if nobody claims them, eventually sold. For the employees who work inside those warehouses, most days are completely routine. Open the shipment, scan the inventory, process the luggage, repeat. But every once in a while, a suitcase arrives that shouldn't exist. A claim ticket doesn't match any airline, or someone appears looking for a bag they were never supposed to know about. The 3 stories you're about to hear all happened inside unclaimed baggage facilities. Each one began with an ordinary piece of lost luggage and ended with investigators asking questions no one could answer. These are 3 disturbing unclaimed baggage facility true horror stories. I started working at an unclaimed baggage facility just after graduating from college. Most people have no idea what happens to luggage that's never picked up at the airport. They assume it disappears into some warehouse forever. In reality, every bag goes through a surprisingly detailed process. It's logged, photographed, stored, and after a legally required waiting period, it's eventually prepared for auction if nobody claims it. When I was hired, I expected to spend my days moving boxes and scanning inventory. Instead, I found myself opening expensive suitcases filled with cameras, designer clothes, laptops, jewelry, and things people had somehow walked away from forever. It was honestly one of the most interesting jobs I'd ever had. This happened about 8 months after I started. Our facility held a large public auction on the first Saturday of every month. The day before each auction, registered buyers were allowed to walk through the warehouse and inspect the outside of the suitcases. You couldn't open them. You couldn't handle the contents. You could only read the baggage tags, examine the condition of the luggage, and decide which lots you wanted to bid on. Most people moved quickly. They looked at dozens of bags in a few minutes. Professional resellers usually knew exactly what they were looking for. But there was one man who stood out. He was probably in his late 70s. Always dressed the same. Gray jacket, dark trousers, black walking cane. He never carried a bidding paddle, never asked employees any questions, never bought a single suitcase. Instead, he walked slowly through every aisle, stopping at certain bags for several seconds before moving on. At first, I assumed he was just curious. Maybe he enjoyed watching the auctions, but after seeing him at 4 consecutive events, I realized something. He wasn't looking at the luggage. He was looking only at the baggage tags, passenger names, airline stickers, flight numbers, nothing else. 1 month. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to keep an eye on him. He walked through the warehouse exactly as he always did. Never rushed, never doubled back. Eventually he stopped in front of a dark blue hardshell suitcase sitting on the 3rd storage rack. He leaned forward, read the owner's name. Then, he smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to notice. He stood there for another few seconds before quietly walking away. He never touched the suitcase, never spoke to anyone, and, just like every previous auction, he left without bidding on a single item. I forgot about it until the following morning. Before the auction officially started, I was updating inventory when I noticed something strange. The blue suitcase was gone. I assumed someone had moved it to another auction lot. They hadn't. The inventory showed it had been officially claimed by its owner just before opening. That wasn't unusual. Every now and then an airline finally located a passenger at the last minute. The paperwork looked legitimate. I didn't think much of it. Then the next month, the exact same thing happened. The old man returned, walked through the preview area, ignored hundreds of suitcases, stopped in front of one, read the baggage tag, smiled, left. The following morning, that suitcase had also been claimed. Different airline, different passenger, same sequence of events. By the 3rd time, I reported it to my supervisor. He laughed at first. Then he checked the records himself. Within an hour, our security manager was reviewing surveillance footage from the previous 6 auctions. Every time, the same man appeared. Every time, one specific suitcase disappeared before the auction. Always through official paperwork. Always signed out as a legitimate late claim. Police were eventually contacted. Detectives pulled the claim documents for every one of those suitcases. The identification used to collect them looked authentic. Driver's licenses, passports, airline correspondence, everything. It took forensic document examiners less than a day to discover every identity document had been professionally forged. The real owners had never contacted the airline. In fact, they couldn't. Every one of them had been reported missing, not while traveling. After returning home from their trip, detectives expanded the investigation. They recovered security footage from baggage facilities in 6 different states. The same elderly man appeared in all of them, always walking the preview floor, always studying baggage tags, never placing a bid, never buying a suitcase, just watching. Weeks later, investigators finally identified the name he'd been using to register for the auctions. It belonged to a man who had died 15 years earlier. The address listed on his registration forms led detectives to a cemetery. Someone had stolen the identity of a dead man and been using it for years. The investigation eventually went cold. No arrests were ever made. A few months before retiring, one of the detectives handling the case stopped by our warehouse to collect some archived records. I asked him if they ever figured out why the old man came to the auctions. He looked at the rows of luggage for a long moment before answering. Then he quietly said something I've never forgotten. He wasn't checking whether the bags were here. I waited. The detective continued. He was checking whether they had been found first. I still think about that every time I see an unclaimed suitcase arrive at the warehouse, because now I can't help wondering whether it's really lost, or whether someone is already planning to come back for it. I worked at one of the largest unclaimed baggage facilities in the country for just under 2 years. Most people imagine the job is exciting because of what's inside the suitcases. Sometimes it is. You'd be surprised what people leave behind. Designer watches, professional cameras, vintage jewelry, cash hidden inside books. We even found a violin once that turned out to be worth more than most houses in my hometown. But after a while, opening suitcases becomes routine. Almost every bag has a perfectly reasonable explanation for why it ended up there. Missed connections, damaged baggage tags, passengers who never came back, wrong destinations. Everything is documented before the luggage ever reaches us. Every suitcase arrives with paperwork explaining exactly why it became unclaimed. That paperwork is usually the least interesting part, which is why one suitcase immediately caught my attention. It arrived during an overnight shipment from a regional airport. Nothing about the suitcase itself stood out. Medium-sized, dark gray, a few scratches on the corners, normal airline stickers. The only unusual thing was the baggage form attached to the handle. It wasn't printed. It was handwritten. At first I assumed someone at the airport had simply run out of labels. Then I read what was written. Reason: passenger never arrived. I frowned. That wasn't one of our standard classifications. Normally it would say something like, owner not located, tag unreadable, flight connection missed, never, passenger never arrived. I carried the suitcase over to my workstation and entered the tracking number into our inventory system. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. No airline. No airport. No baggage record. The number simply didn't exist. I asked my supervisor if the database was down. He checked from his computer. Same result. He contacted the shipping company that delivered the latest batch of luggage. According to them, the suitcase had arrived mixed in with more than 300 legitimate unclaimed bags. Nobody remembered loading it. Nobody remembered seeing it before that morning. Management assumed it had simply been miscoded somewhere along the way. Since there was no immediate explanation, I was told to inventory the contents while they contacted the airlines. I unlocked the suitcase. Inside, everything looked completely ordinary. A week's worth of neatly folded clothes, a toothbrush, travel-sized toiletries, a paperback novel, 2 unopened bottles of water. Nothing unusual, no money, no electronics, no identification. It looked exactly like the luggage of someone who had packed for a short business trip. I almost closed it. Then I noticed something odd. The interior lining on one side wasn't sitting flat. It looked as though it had been stitched back into place. Company policy required us to document any hidden compartments. So I carefully unzipped the lining. Behind it was another zipper. Inside were dozens of airline baggage claim tags. Different airlines, different airports, different countries. None of them belonged to the suitcase I was holding. Some were only a few months old. Others were faded with age. Every tag had been neatly cut from another piece of luggage. I counted 63 before I stopped. The police arrived less than an hour later. Detectives photographed everything before sending the suitcase to a forensic lab. Over the following weeks, they contacted every airline connected to the baggage tags. The results were unsettling. Every one of those tags belonged to luggage officially reported missing sometime during the previous 8 years. Different airports, different passengers, no connection between them, except that the baggage tags had somehow all ended up inside the same suitcase. Investigators began reviewing airport surveillance footage linked to the latest shipment. Most of it showed nothing useful. Then one airport found something. A man entered the terminal pushing the gray suitcase on a luggage cart. He wasn't checking in for a flight. He never approached an airline counter. He simply walked to an unattended baggage conveyor near the oversized luggage area, looked around once, left the suitcase beside the belt, turned around, and calmly walked back out of the terminal. He never looked over his shoulder. He never hurried. By the time airport security noticed the unattended luggage, it had already been moved into the normal baggage handling system. From there, it followed the exact same route as every legitimate suitcase. Nobody ever saw the man again. Investigators spent months trying to identify him. The cameras captured his face clearly, yet every identification they received led to stolen identities or dead ends. A few months later, one of the detectives returned to collect the suitcase after the forensic examination was complete. Before he left, I asked him the question that had been bothering me since the day we opened it. If he wanted to get rid of the suitcase, why leave it inside an airport? The detective thought about it for a moment, then quietly said, "Maybe he wasn't trying to get rid of it." I waited. He looked back at the evidence box and added, "Maybe he wanted to know if anyone recognized what was inside." The investigation was eventually suspended. The man was never identified. And every now and then, when another shipment of unclaimed luggage arrives, I still catch myself looking for handwritten paperwork, because if one suitcase managed to get into the system without belonging to any airline, I've always wondered how many others made it through unnoticed. I worked the overnight shift at an unclaimed baggage facility for almost 3 years. Most people assume every suitcase in those warehouses is forgotten forever. That's not how it works. By law, every airline has to make repeated attempts to contact the owner before a bag can be declared unclaimed. Only after months of paperwork, tracking requests, and failed contact attempts does the luggage finally arrive at facilities like ours. By the time we receive it, it's supposed to have no owner. That's why what happened one night made absolutely no sense. It was just after 1 in the morning. I was sorting a shipment of luggage that had finally completed the legal holding period and was being prepared for auction. Most of the bags were routine: damaged handles, old airline stickers, dust from sitting in storage for months. Then one suitcase caught my attention. It had a bright orange baggage claim ticket attached to the handle. Nothing unusual about that, except the date printed on the ticket was tomorrow. I actually thought I'd read it wrong. I checked again. Same thing. The claim ticket showed a date that hadn't happened yet. I assumed the printer at the airport had malfunctioned. Then I scanned the barcode. Error. I tried a second scanner. Same result. The flight number printed beneath it didn't exist. Neither did the airport routing code. It looked authentic. Every security feature was there, but none of the information belonged to any real airline. I showed it to my supervisor. He laughed and said, "Probably somebody testing a printer." He removed the orange tag, threw it into the shred bin, and told me to continue processing the suitcase. The following morning was auction day. Buyers were already arriving when I was called to the customer service counter. A man stood quietly in front of the desk. mid-50s, average height, plain gray jacket, nothing memorable about him. He waited until I walked over, then calmly said, "I'm here to collect my suitcase." I asked for identification. Instead of reaching for his wallet, he reached into his jacket pocket. He placed half of an orange baggage claim ticket on the counter. My stomach immediately tightened. It matched the one we'd thrown away the night before. Same paper, same color, same serial number. Even the torn edge matched perfectly. He calmly slid it toward me. "I believe you have the other half." I didn't answer. He looked completely relaxed, like he'd done this before. I explained that the suitcase had already entered auction inventory, and that we couldn't release property without verifying ownership. He nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He asked only one question. "Has anyone opened it yet?" I told him no. He stared at me for a second, then quietly smiled. "Good." Without another word, he turned around and walked out of the building. I watched him leave through the front doors. By the time security reached the parking lot, he was gone. Police arrived less than an hour later. Forensic technicians recovered the shredded pieces of the original orange claim ticket from our disposal bins. The paper was professionally manufactured, not copied, not printed on a home printer. Whoever made it had duplicated security features normally used by commercial airlines. The barcode didn't belong to any baggage system in North America. It had been invented. Detectives opened the suitcase under controlled conditions. At first, there was nothing remarkable. Clothes, books, travel toiletries, everything neatly packed. Then one investigator noticed the interior lining had recently been stitched back together. Inside was a sealed manila envelope. No writing, no fingerprints, just photographs. Dozens of them. Every photograph showed someone leaving an airport baggage claim area. Different airports, different cities, different years. Every person was carrying luggage. Every photograph had a handwritten date on the back, and every face was circled in red ink. Detectives spent months identifying the people. Several had later become subjects in unrelated missing person investigations. None of the cases had ever been connected until those photographs surfaced. A nationwide investigation followed. Airports, airlines, surveillance footage. Nothing led to the man who had walked into our facility that morning. The case eventually went cold. About 8 months later, our warehouse manager received a phone call from another unclaimed baggage facility nearly 1,000 miles away. An employee there described a customer who had calmly walked into their office. He wasn't angry. He wasn't demanding. He simply placed half of a bright orange baggage claim ticket on the counter and asked one question: "Has anyone opened it yet?" When I heard that, I realized something that still bothers me today. Whoever that man was, he wasn't trying to recover lost luggage. He was checking whether something hidden inside had already been discovered. And I've never stopped wondering how many suitcases reached their rightful owners before anyone ever thought to look beneath the lining. Those were 3 disturbing unclaimed baggage facility true horror stories. Most people never think twice about the luggage they check before boarding a flight. They assume that if a suitcase goes missing, it's simply delayed. But somewhere, behind the scenes, there are warehouses filled with bags that were never reclaimed. Most of them contain nothing more than forgotten clothes and personal belongings. Every now and then, one contains a story that no inventory system can explain. Whether it was forged claim tickets, missing passengers, or someone who knew far more about the baggage system than they should have. These cases all started with something people overlook every day: an ordinary suitcase. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, let me know in the comments which one disturbed you the most. And if you've ever worked at an airport, baggage facility, or cargo warehouse and experienced something unusual, I'd love to read your story. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more realistic horror stories every week. As always, thanks for listening. Travel safely.